In the quiet village of Umuada, where the earth whispered secrets and the trees swayed with memory, a woman named Nwaka lived alone by the edge of the forest. Her hut stood far from others, not because she was feared, but because she chose silence over noise. Every morning, she swept her compound with careful hands and hummed songs no one else remembered. Her eyes were sharp like a hawk's, and her footsteps made no sound. People said she had no family, but others believed her family was buried in places no one dared to go. Umaka died on a Sunday morning. No one knew what killed her. Her body was found lying peacefully beside her hut, wrapped in the same white wrapper she always wore. The elders gathered and a quick burial was arranged. There was no child to mourn her, no husband to carry her memory, only a few curious villagers who helped dig the grave. The earth accepted her gently. The village priest muttered blessings and they covered her body with red sand. By nightfall, the wind howled strangely, and the birds flew in circles above her grave. 3 nights later, strange things began to happen. A young palm wine tapper walking past her compound at dusk claimed he saw smoke rising from her chimney. He said he smelled something burning, something sweet and rotten at once. The elders dismissed him, saying the boy was drunk. But the next night, an old woman returning from the stream dropped her calabash in fright. She saw Nwaka, the dead woman, standing at her doorway, staring into the forest. The woman ran, screaming, and swore she heard Nwaka whisper, "It's not over yet." The village held a gathering at the market square. The priest insisted the burial had been proper. Some spirits linger, he explained, but they fade with time. Yet, more stories followed. A hunter saw her walking in the bush at dawn. A trader heard humming near her hut. And one brave man, the blacksmith named Obidike, decided to investigate for himself. He waited in the shadows near Umaka's grave one night. What he saw chilled his bones. The earth around her grave was cracked, and in the moonlight, two bare feet slowly stepped out. Obidike fled before he could see her face. He returned to the village trembling and refused to speak of what he saw. The villagers whispered in fear. They said Umaka had returned because something was wrong with her burial. Maybe her spirit was not ready, said one woman. Maybe she was buried alive, said another. That night, the chief called for a cleansing ritual. Drums were beaten, leaves were burnt, prayers were chanted, but nothing stopped the appearances. Nwaka's hut, once quiet and still, now had light in its window, faint, flickering, and alive. One evening, the village seer, a woman named Mama Ijoma, walked to Nwaka's grave with nothing but a burning stick and a calabash of salt water. Some dead don't rest because the living buried a lie, she muttered. She circled the grave, poured the water, and sprinkled ash. Suddenly, the flames on her stick vanished. The air turned cold. A whisper came from the trees. Twice wrong, twice buried. Mama Ijoma's eyes widened. She dropped the calabash and ran back. That night, thunder rumbled, though the sky was clear. The chief sent for a grave digger named Anugwo, a man with no fear and little patience. Dig her up, the chief ordered. Let us see what lies below. A crowd gathered as Anugwo began to shovel. The earth was oddly loose, as if freshly placed. When he reached the coffin and pried it open, the villagers gasped. Nwaka's body was gone. Only her white wrapper lay folded neatly where she had once rested. No bones, no dust, just silence. Anugwa dropped his shovel and backed away, whispering. She walked out herself. Panic spread like fire. The villagers locked their doors early, refused to fetch water past dusk, and avoided the path near Nwaka's hut. The chief consulted 3 different priests, all of whom refused to visit. She wasn't just a woman, one said. She knew something forbidden. But what could Umaka have known? She had lived alone, said little, and hurt no one. Still, someone remembered. Long ago, Nwaka once entered the forbidden forest beyond Upuru Hill and came back smiling. No one returns from there the same, the old man muttered. A man named Kene, a traveler passing through Omuada, heard the tale in the market and laughed. Ghost stories are for children, he laughed. But that evening, curious, he walked to Umaka's hut. He knocked once. No answer. He pushed the door and it creaked open. Inside, the air was thick and cold. A pot steamed on the fire. The same white wrapper was laid over a mat. Then he saw her, Nwaka, sitting in the corner, face shadowed, humming. He didn't scream. He could not. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Kene was never seen again. His bag was found near Nwaka's doorstep, and the pot inside her hut had gone cold. People said they saw Nwaka walking again, but now she didn't just stare. She knocked on doors. She stood outside homes at midnight. She's looking for something, whispered the market women. Or someone. Mama Ijoma returned, this time with 7 other seers. They formed a circle and chanted all night near her grave, but their fire turned to black smoke, and one of them fell dead before dawn. The elders admitted defeat. We must speak to the bone caller, said the chief. The bone caller lived deep in the desert, and he hadn't visited the village in 20 years. A message was sent. When he arrived, he was old, thin and blind, but his ears twitched like those of a hunting dog. He listened to the tale and nodded slowly. Then he whispered, "She was not meant to be buried here. You buried a woman who had unfinished business with the beyond." Then he asked, "Did anyone see her eyes before she died?" No one had. Her eyes had been shut when she was found. The bone caller demanded her wrapper, her cooking pot, and a bowl of rainwater. He sat alone in her hut throughout the night. At dawn he emerged, sweating, trembling. She made a bargain with the other side, he said, but she broke it. Now they want her soul back, and ours too, if we interfere. The villagers begged for a solution. He answered, she must be buried again, but this time in the place she first crossed, the forest beyond Nkuru Hill. No one wanted to go there. Nkuru Hill was feared even by wild animals. The forest beyond was thick, dark and full of strange echoes. But Umaka had once gone there and returned. Now they had to return her there to end the terror. 5 strong men were chosen. They carried a new coffin lined with salt and wrapped in black cloth. At dusk, they arrived at Umaka's hut. She wasn't inside, but as they turned to leave, she stood behind them, silent, barefoot, eyes wide and red like fire. She did not speak, she did not scream. She simply stared. The men dropped the coffin and ran, but one of them, Ozoimena, turned back. He held his ground and whispered, "Forgive us." Nwaka blinked, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. Then she stepped into the coffin and lay down. No one dared move at first, but the others returned and sealed the coffin tight. As they lifted it, the air trembled. Trees leaned, owls cried in daylight. The forest path cleared itself as they walked towards Nkuru Hill. The path twisted and turned, but no one stumbled. It was as if something invincible guided their feet. When they reached the forbidden forest, mist curled around their legs. They dug quickly. The ground hissed with each scoop. When the grave was ready, They lowered the coffin. Suddenly, Nwaka's voice echoed from inside. Bury me deeper, deeper than the first time. Only then would they forget me. The men froze, then obeyed. They covered the grave, packed the earth, and placed a stone carved with circle over it. As soon as the last handful of earth was dropped, the mist disappeared. The wind grew still. Birds sang again. It was as if the forest sighed in relief. The five men returned to Omuada just before dawn. The chief met them at the edge of the village and noticed something strange. Ozoemena, the one who had spoken to Nwaka, now had white hair, though he was only 30. He said nothing, just stared at the sky and whispered, "She's resting now." And for the first time in weeks, the village slept peacefully. Days passed. Nwaka's hut stayed quiet. No one dared enter it. The market reopened. The children played again. The elders breathed easier. But one night, the chief's dog began barking madly. The guard stepped outside and saw nothing until he noticed the moon. It was red. The next morning, the wrapper that had been buried with Umaka was found hanging on the chief's compound gate. No one knew how it got there. The bone caller returned and said, "Something still calls her. Something from this side." The villagers panicked again. This time, they asked who had known Nwaka deeply before her silence. Only one name came up: Aduri, a herbalist who once lived near Nwaka. She had moved away long ago after her son drowned. When she was brought back, she refused to speak at first. Then she said, "We were not just friends. We were sisters by blood, born of the same womb." The villagers gasped. Adure continued, "But we chose different paths. I stayed with the living. She sought power from the dead." The elders demanded answers. Adure said, Umaka had once vanished for 7 days, then returned with herbs that healed anything and a ring that never rusted. She said the spirits gave them to her, but they asked for something in return: her voice, her joy, her children she never bore. The bone caller nodded grimly. The price was not fully paid. She tried to escape it by dying here, but depth of the spirit follow across words, Adure whispered. Then she must pay in full. To settle the debt, a ritual had to be done, not to punish Nwaka, but to release her from both worlds. A bridge had to be built between the living and the dead, with one who loved her as the vessel. Aduri agreed. At midnight, she enters the forest alone, with a god of river stones and a piece of Nwaka's hair. At the edge of the grave, she knelt and began to sing. The ground trembled. A crack split open. Mist poured out, and a voice said, "Why now, sister?" Adure kept singing. Her voice shook but didn't break. "Because the depth follows me too," she said. "Because your pain burns in me." From the crack, Nwaka's voice replied, "They want more than my soul. They want remembrance." Adure whispered, "Then take mine. Let me walk where you cannot." The forest held its breath. Trees stopped rustling. The moon dimmed. A shadow rose from the earth. It was Nwaka, half transparent, no longer angry, just tired. "You would give your name for mine?" she asked. Adure nodded. "Yes, I would." The spirits demanded proof. Adure was instructed to cut her palm and drop her blood into the crack. As her blood touched the soil, a sound like thunder erupted on the ground. The earth lit up with glowing lines, symbols no one had ever seen before. Nwaka looked at her sister and began to fade, smiling. "Now I can rest," she said. Adure fell forward. eyes wide. The earth swallowed Umaka's spirit completely. The crack sealed itself. The forest went silent again. When morning came, Adure was gone, but her wrapper was folded beside the grave. Back in the village, the people waited. At sunrise, only one figure appeared from the forest. It was Adure, or so it seemed, but her eyes glowed slightly, and her voice echoed when she spoke. "It is done," she said. "She will not return again." The chief asked, "And you?" Adure looked at her hands. "I carry her shadow, but the debt is paid." From that day, she never touched water during the day and spoke only after sunset. Her hut was placed near the forest and no one visited uninvited. Months passed. Peace returned to Omuada, but people noticed strange things. Sick animals walked past Adure's hut and were healed by morning. Rain always fell softly near her roof, and every new moon her compound glowed faintly. The bone caller once more visited and said, "She is now a bridge, half woman, half whisper." He warned, if another dies wrongly, she will be the one to call them back. She is the new keeper of balance. The villagers feared her, but they also brought her gifts, yams and oil. One market day, a stranger arrived. His name was Dike, a merchant from the west. He heard whispers about the woman who was buried twice and the sister who took her place. He laughed, not out of disbelief but curiosity. "I trade in charms," he said, "but I've never seen a spirit walk like flesh." Against all warnings, he visited Adure's hut. She welcomed him with a nod. "Do not ask questions you fear the answers to," she said. But Dike only smiled. That night, he did not return to his lodging. The next day, Dike's boots were found on the steps of Adure's hut. One boot was filled with ash and the other with feathers. Adure came out and placed both boots on the path. "Let this be the last curiosity," she said. No one questioned her again, but quietly, people began to say she had taken on Nwaka's power, and maybe more. The bone caller warned the chief again, "Do not bury lies, do not silence the dying, or another will be buried twice, and she may not have a sister to pay her price." Adure rarely spoke after that, but the earth beneath her hut remained warm even in harmattan. Birds circled above her compound without crying, and sometimes late at night, villagers claimed to see her talking to someone invincible near the edge of the trees. "She talks to the spirits," they whispered. "She tells them our truths, and no one could lie near her." Once a man tried to accuse his wife falsely. Adure walked into the square, pointed at him and said, "Your breath is smoke." He confessed before she even blinked. Years passed and the tale of Nwaka faded into legend, but Adure's presence remained strong. A time came when another villager died in strange circumstances, sudden with no illness or warning. The family buried her quickly, in secret. That night, the woman's voice was heard calling from the edge of the forest. Adure stood at the path before anyone else. "You buried fear," she said to the family. "Now you must dig up the truth." They reopened the grave and found nobody, only a stone with the word "Return" carved into it. Terrified, the family begged Adure for help. She agreed but warned them. This time, the price will not be blood. It will be memory. She took their family head into the forest and made him whisper all the things he had hidden: betrayals, bribes, broken promises. As he spoke, the air grew heavy. When he finished, the stone in the grave cracked and turned into dust. The woman's body returned, peaceful and still. But the family head lost his ability to speak from that day on. His silence became the village's warning. Adure became more than a keeper. She became a mirror. a reflection of every hidden wrong. People began calling her Uche Ndu, thought of the dead. No one dared lie before her. Children were taught to speak the truth by her shadow. Farmers left offerings of corn and salt near her doorstep. Traders bowed before passing her hut. She never asked for worship, but reverence followed her like a shadow. And at every festival, a chair was left empty in her honor, covered in a white wrapper, just like the one Nwaka once wore. One harmattan season, Adure fell ill. Her skin grew pale, her voice weak, but she smiled often and whispered to the wind, "I hear them again." She told the bone caller, "They are calling softly now." The bone caller nodded. "Your time draws near." The villagers cried, but as she raised her hand, "This time I will choose where I go." She walked herself to the edge of the forest and lay beneath the tree where Nwaka's grave once opened. There she closed her eyes and the wind wrapped her in the mist. 3 nights later her body was gone. No animal tracks, no signs of struggle. Only her bracelet, carved from bone and stone, remained. The villagers built a shrine at a spot, not of gold or marble, but of silence and storytelling. Once a year they gather and tell the story of the woman who was buried twice and the sister who rewrote fate. No one forgets, no one lies. For to lie is to dig a grave where truth refuses to stay buried. And Aduri listens, even now from the space between breaths. Many moons later, a wandering poet arrived in Omuada. He heard whispers of Aduri and begged to visit her shrine. The villagers agreed. That night he lit a lantern and sat near the stone. He played his flute and his notes danced into the trees. Suddenly he saw a white figure watching from afar, not menacing, not sad, just present. The poet bowed his head and sang a verse. When he opened his eyes, the figure was gone, but the wind carried his tune like it had been waiting to be sung. The poet returned to his land and told the story in every village he passed. People listened, some wept, some shivered, and some remembered the promises they had broken. Slowly, across regions, the legend of Aduri and Nwaka, two sisters, one buried twice, the other choosing the grave to heal the balance. Songs were written, drums were carved with their names, and in faraway markets, charms shaped like twin spirals began to appear, representing death and life, shadow and light, all bound by the courage to face the truth. In one distant land, a dying queen asked her priest, "What happens if I die with secrets?" The priest replied, "Then your shadow will wander, waiting for a sister." The queen shivered. "Then I must tell the truth now." And she confessed to crimes that saved the kingdom but stained her soul. The people forgave her. She died peacefully. Later, they said a woman in white stood by her grave at night, listening, not judging. They whispered, "That was Aduri. She walks where truth is needed." In the forest of Nkuru Hill, strange flowers began to grow, white with petals shaped like open hands. Herbalists said they healed even shame. Hunters said they glowed in the dark. No one picked them. They were called Adure's ears, for they believed she still listened beneath the soil. Sometimes a wind would pass through the forest carrying soft humming. If one listened closely, it sounded like two women singing, one with sorrow, the other with peace. Two voices, buried and unburied, but never forgotten. Now, travelers still visit Umuada, seeking the forest, the shrine, and the truth. But the villagers always give one warning. If you carry lies in your chest, the forest will not let you live the same. And it's true. Some returned pale, some silent, and some changed. But none returned empty. They carried the weight of the tale and the courage to speak what they once buried deep. The story of Nwaka and Adure teaches not just fear, but wisdom. Not all graves are made of earth, some are made of silence. The elders of Umuada made a rule: no one may be buried without witnesses, without last words, and without truth. They say a burial without truth is a seed for future hunting. So they listen closely to the dying. They ask, "Is there anything you wish to say?" And if the dying remain silent, they whisper Adura's name and wait. Sometimes a confession comes, sometimes a tear, but always peace. And so peace returns to the living too, like the wind that cools a sweating brow with after nightmare fades. And when the villagers speak of Aduri, they do not cry, they smile. They say she carried a body not meant for her, and she changed the way the living treats the dead. They say she turned fear into guidance and silence into power. Children now grow hearing her tale, not to fear ghosts, but to honor truth. Her story lives on, like roots beneath soil, quiet but unshaken. Her footsteps no longer echo in the night, but her spirit walks in every honest word and every grave dug with care. So, if you ever pass through Omuada and hear a soft humming in the wind, do not be afraid. It is the song of two sisters, one who was buried twice and the one who chose burial to set things right. Stop and listen. Speak the truth you carry, and remember, that is not the end for those who died holding secrets, but neither is it the end for those who live with love strong enough to dig them free. Thank you so much for watching. If you got to this point, please give this video a thumbs up. It will help grow my small YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, do well to subscribe and turn on post notifications so you get notified when I post more interesting content like this. Please share my videos, like my videos, and leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts on my stories. If you haven't gone through my page yet, do well to go through my channel. I have more interesting stories like this. See you guys in my next video. Bye.